Okay.
The reason this is different is because
Some neighbors here.
no, we don't need a public. I was assuming that we were gonna finish exclusive of the 5 years, $25,000. For social service, when it turns out, we have to under, even after the flashback, I didn't really have time to go through and match them all.
Work on my driveway.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Then it rained yesterday, washed it all back out.
Oh, no.
Roads.
Bless your heart.
Like a whole department. I mean, there could be 50 adjustments. Right. But what I'm showing is that we got
Went to Hell Lake first time. Went to Hell Lake.
we got 50.
It's pretty.
It's cold up there in July.
Yeah, but that water's cold. There are little kids playing in it.
That's where I grew up, was up in there. Yeah. That's where we're all fishing and everything.
We went up to the lookout, Cumber's Rock. It was pretty.
Justin's got a cabin.
That's what he's telling me. And we went up what I consider probably was a rough way on the 21. When we came out, we went out into Cumber's Rock community. That road was a lot better.
I'm not arguing.
Bring back the board from closed session. Do I have a motion to do such?
Mr. Chairman, I move that, we adjourn from the closed session to open session.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
A second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? I'll start with you, Joe.
Yes.
Yes.
I'll say yes. Robbie?
Yes.
Dr. Lecter?
Yes.
Bob?
And yes.
All right, do I have a motion to certify closed session?
Make a motion that we so certify that we only discuss the items A1, 3, 5, and 8.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
So move.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Start with you.
I
Bob?
vote yes.
Dr. Lecter?
Yes.
Robbie?
Yes.
I say yes. Philip?
Yes.
Darnell?
Yes.
All right, Robbie, would you do the pledge and invocation, please?
All right. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for this opportunity to gather together today, and we thank you for the day that you have provided for us. Lord, we ask that you just watch over us and bless us. Keep us mindful of our duties. Lord, we ask that you be with those in the community that are sick, shut in, and struggling with all their issues, Lord. Lord, we also ask that you just keep us safe on our journeys back home and protect us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, if anyone has comments, if you signed up to speak, you'll be the only person speaking. You will come forward. There won't be any other, unless the chairman recognizes you from the floor, there will be no discussion outside of that. Has everybody got that? Is that clear with everyone? If you have a question, you stand, and if you get recognized, you can ask your question. Any deviation for that, I may ask the sheriff to remove folks. Okay? All right. Hope everybody had a good time getting here tonight. We've got a lot to cover, so we're gonna get to it. All right, need to ask a motion for the approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I think we need to add the resolution that's been presented to us to the agenda. The one, it's a resolution, Carroll County Board of Supervisors resolution amending appropriations fiscal year 2019-2020.
That's not correct.
Is that not the correct? Is that not the correct? Okay. That's the wrong title on this.
We have two resolutions. One is already in there, correct?
There's one resolution which is basically, should you agree to pass the budget adjustments that Councilor asked you to pull out and vote on separately, that's just a ratification of that vote. The second thing that you have that didn't appear on the website correctly, although it was listed as an agenda item, an ordinance, a proposed ordinance to change the name of the Industrial Development Authority to the Economic Development Authority.
All right, those two items in there, but you need a motion to add.
Because the public hearing was on that, then they're gonna have the public hearing, and then they'll have this.
All right, we need we need a motion to add a resolution with a admin position of acting county administrator, or interim county administrator.
I'll add that to my motion to amend the agenda.
All right, have a motion to amend the agenda to add the interim county administrator. Have a second?
So moved.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, start with you, Joe.
Yes.
Nope.
Yes.
I say yes. Robbie?
Yes.
Dr. Lecter?
Yes.
Yes.
Bob? All right. Now, that takes care of that one, but we need to pull one out.
No, the consent agenda, and motion to pull an item out.
All right, that's when we get to it. So, all right, so now I guess we need, we did approve the agenda, correct?
Yes, you
All
will.
right, now we need to, do I have a motion on the consent agenda?
This is where we need to remove the budget transfer.
I think you need to, yes, a motion to pull the budget transfer item out of the consent agenda. Consider it separate.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we remove the budget transfer under section B of the consent agenda. And
Consider it separate.
consider it separate due to a change in that.
All right, I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? essentially what we're doing, we have a budget document that we're pulling out. Just change, there were just a few changes in it, am I correct in saying that?
There's a significant change to it, but it's a good change. Basically, we added another $500,000 worth of adjustments that will allow us to close out the year entirely with no hearings, with no additional appropriations, which we weren't expecting to be able to do. So this is a good thing.
And that's something that's happened just recently, just additional
Yeah,
stuff.
we didn't know for sure really until yesterday.
Right.
And we've been trying to
Exactly.
And we had to check to make sure it all settled out.
So,
We're in the discussion portion of it at this point.
right.
Any other discussion on it? All right, I'll start with you, Bob,
I vote yes.
Dr. Little.
We voted on the resolution.
Yeah.
Yes, and replacing it with the one that was handed to us.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't spell that out. Robbie?
Yes.
I say yes. Philip?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
All right. Motion carries. All right, what else do we need to do?
Now, I think you can go ahead and consider that motion, that one
Yep.
agenda item separately, and then you would approve the consent agenda after that.
All right, we have a motion, a resolution in front of you, which will lead to, okay, so we have to make the motion to accept this new document. Rick?
Which is amending the appropriations for fiscal year.
No, it's not amending any appropriation. It's just moving money from one department to another several times.
Right. I thought we covered that.
It was an updated document that was provided by the county administrator that was not included in the agenda that was made public, so it's an updated schedule of budget transfers that are being proposed to the board to close out the 2018-2019 fiscal year. And so you would be you'd be voting on a resolution to approve that updated document instead of the document that was included in the agenda packet. And I believe we have copies of that schedule that can be available to the public for their review.
All right, do I have that motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, Bob, we'll start with you.
Yes, I vote yes.
Dr. Littrell?
Yes.
Robbie?
Yes.
I say yes. Philip?
Yes.
Junior?
Yes. But this was very good.
Yes, it's better news than central. All right, our next resolution is,
Mr. Chairman?
yes,
If I could interrupt.
Yes.
I would suggest we approve the rest of the consent agenda and then move on to the next one.
thank you. All right, do I have a motion to approve the rest of the consent agenda?
I have a question.
Yes.
On the vote, certify the closed session as me voting yes, I was absent that day.
Nice. We usually at two places at once.
Especially when they're that far apart, right?
Any other changes to the minutes? All right, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda
With that correction.
with that correction?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I second.
A motion and a second, any discussion? All right, Joe Neal, we'll start with you.
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
I say yes. Robbie?
Yes.
Dr. Littrell?
Yes.
And
Bob?
yes.
Now, I'm ready for the other resolution. Whereas the board is aware that position of county administrator will be vacant on August 19th, 2019. And whereas the Carroll Board of Supervisors, the board, has conducted a search for an interim county administrator and has determined to enter into an employment contract with Arcelor Dalton effective immediately. And whereas the board has requested Steve Truitt, outgoing county administrator, to continue employment during his 90-day notice period and to assist with the transition of duties to Mr. Dalton and to work on such other duties as may be directed by the board from time to time during such notice period, including without limitation economic development projects with which Mr. Truitt is familiar. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Supervisors of Carroll County, Virginia, that Arcelor Dalton is hereby named interim county administrator, and the chair of the Board of Supervisors is hereby authorized to execute the contract of employment between the county and Mr. Dalton. All right, do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Start with you, Bob.
Discussion is that I think we're very fortunate to find a man of Solel Dalton's caliber. And thank goodness he was available on short notice. And I proudly vote yes.
Dr. Littrell?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
I say yes. Phil?
Yes.
Neil?
Yes.
Would like to say a couple of things. Slell worked for the county administrator in Wythe County for 22 years. He did a lot of other work over there before that time. He was also a recipient of the Bronze Star Medal and the Purple Heart, 3 years of military service with the U.S. Army. And there's a lot of other qualifications I have since forgot. I guess we'll move forward. If you come forward, we'll take your seat up here. We'll finish out whatever else we got going on tonight. I guess we'll go down to we'll cover CAC, Emily Simpson.
I have a little presentation for you. So we have to put the screen here all the way down and we'll get started. While that's pulling up, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Emily Simpson, and I'm the forensic interviewer with the Children's Trust Children's Advocacy Center. And this evening, I'm wanting to talk with you a little bit about a new office that we opened here in Carroll County next to the old Woodlawn School, as well as about the services that we provide to the community. So a little bit about the Children's Advocacy Center. Our goal is to help reduce the amount of trauma that a child experiences throughout the investigative process of child abuse allegations. So we work very closely with our local law enforcement, child protective services agencies, as well as other multidisciplinary team members, which I'll tell you about here in just a few minutes. So just a little bit of background about our agency. I am employed by the Children's Trust, which is a Roanoke-based organization and has several different programs under the umbrella of Children's Trust. We have programs such as the Court-Appointed Special Advocates of the Roanoke Valley, conflict mediation services, as well as healthy families, child abuse prevention education within the school systems in the Roanoke Valley area, as well as the Children's Advocacy Center, which is the program that I am a part of. We are led by Christina Hatch. She's our executive director over all of the programs, but the Children's Advocacy Center is directed by Christina Rouse, and she is also our lead forensic interviewer. And I'll tell you a little bit about what forensic interviewing and family advocacy is in just a minute. We do have 4 Children's Advocacy Centers in Southwest Virginia. We have our main office, which is in Roanoke, and we have 2 forensic interviewers in that office, 2 family advocates. They just recently opened up a satellite location in Bedford. They're operating out of the Internet Crimes Against Children office. So they have a very close relationship with the Bedford Sheriff's Office and other team members up there. I am housed full-time in our Christiansburg Children's Advocacy Center, or CAC as I'll probably refer to it as here in the next few minutes, along with our family advocate, Allison Kearns. We just recently opened up a new space here in Carroll County in Woodlawn, and both myself and Allison are traveling down here approximately once a week for now to conduct interviews and to work with our team members down here in Carroll County and surrounding areas. So what is a Children's Advocacy Center? Like I said, it is designed to help bring different agencies together to make sure that children and families are not falling through the cracks throughout the investigative process. In 1985, a prosecutor in Huntsville, Alabama, recognized the need for some streamlined services. Children were having to share their experiences of abuse multiple times to school personnel, to a nurse, then to a patrol officer, to a detective, to a CPS investigator, to a prosecutor. So they were having to share their stories multiple times to many different people, and it was causing additional trauma and negative impact to both the children and the families, and ultimately also to the prosecution results as well. So he designed this Children's Advocacy Center and multidisciplinary team model to bring everybody to the table that's involved, because he knew that no one agency was able to fulfill all of the needs that a child and a family may require at any given time throughout the process and beyond the process. So people that we have at the table as part of our multidisciplinary team include Department of Social Services, specifically Child Protective Services, law enforcement here in Carroll County. That includes Sheriff's Office as well as Hillsville Police Department, different mental health agencies, the Children's Advocacy Center, of course, victim witness with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, as well as forensic nurses and other victim advocates.
Question?
Yes.
All right. I was formerly in the school system, and oftentimes we had allegations of child abuse
Sure.
occurring in the home,
Mhm.
and in the wind-up, the child was put in between a rock and a hard place with alleged perpetrators sitting there, and then they left the meeting, got in the car, and went home with them. And how did y'all address situations like that if you feel like it's needed?
Sure, so that actually is a great segue into my next slide. So
I told you I'd help.
I appreciate that. So we do provide different services, and one of our main services is forensic interviewing. So when law enforcement or Child Protective Services receives a complaint of alleged abuse, whether that be from the school system or another mandated reporter or another citizen in the community, they have the opportunity to call me and refer a child to our center to have a forensic interview done. And that's just a fancy word for me sitting down with the child one-on-one in a child-friendly environment. They're not going to the police station, they're not going to the CPS office, they're coming to our neutral child-friendly facility where I sit one-on-one with a child in an audio and video recorded room, and I have a very specific way of interviewing a child that is neutral, child and developmentally friendly, non-leading, and fact-finding in nature. My job is not to interrogate criminals, my job is not to remove children, and those are all important roles, of course, but my job is just to meet one-on-one with those children. We don't allow any alleged offenders or perpetrators on our premises. We do want to make sure that it is a place where children are safe and secure to be able to disclose if there are, in fact, any substantiated allegations. So what I do is I interview the child one-on-one, and in an adjacent room we have some members of our multidisciplinary team. Typically that is our law enforcement investigators, CPS investigators, and sometimes our Commonwealth's attorneys and forensic nurses if they're involved in the process. They're able to see and hear everything that I'm doing with the child in the moment, and that really helps to start the communication and interagency workings from the very beginning. Everybody that needs to be there can hear and see everything that's happening. They can ensure that that child is safe. If something is disclosed during the forensic interview, CPS is able to kind of have an understanding of what might need to happen next. If they need to write a safety plan, if a child needs to be placed in a different setting, if somebody might need to be arrested, law enforcement, is there. If they need to interview an alleged suspect or perpetrator, they have all of that information together, and that helps everybody work together so that kids and families are really able to reap the most benefits, as possible.
I like the idea that you're questioning the children because in the past, it would be a whole host of people and the questions you ask, you could send a child in a certain direction by just skewing the questions and by every interview you have with a child is an experience for you that you can build on. And if you use the same approach, it should be not biased and not skewing it.
Right, and I am trained in 2 separate forensic interviewing protocols which are used internationally, and so they are widely practiced, widely reviewed. I do undergo peer reviews, so we have other forensic interviewers in the field to watch some of my interviews to ensure that I'm adhering to best practice, to make sure that I'm not asking leading questions, that I'm not skewing, any potential information. So while I am interviewing a child, we have our family advocate, and she meets with the non-offending caretaker at our center, and she does this to identify information, any background information that might be useful for us, for the multidisciplinary team members to know, but also to help identify some support services and resources that the caretakers may need or already have in place. She's also able to refer them to mental health services to begin that healing process. Even when there aren't disclosures, we can still make referrals to our mental health partners. And Allison Kearns and our other family advocates in our Roanoke and Bedford offices have 24-hour crisis intervention cell phones. So if there is ever a time in the middle of the night that they have a question or something's going on where they need that additional support, they're able to call our family advocate, and she can help them navigate through the process, whether it's giving them a referral, pointing them in the right direction, and kind of acting as a buffer between the investigators and the families. And that brings me to our multidisciplinary team facilitation. At the moment, I facilitate 5 separate multidisciplinary team meetings in the different jurisdictions that we serve. We have Carroll County, which meets once a month. Grayson and Galax meet together every other month. We also have Pulaski County, Montgomery County, and the city of Bradford. So each month we go to these different jurisdictions and we meet at a table with everybody together, all of the people that were on this previous slide, prosecutors or Commonwealth's attorneys, we have victim advocates, mental health, CPS, law enforcement. Everybody's together to ensure that communication is taking place between the agencies. We want to, again, really minimize the impact, the negative impact to these children and families. So if there is information that needs to be shared, perhaps somebody has been arrested and another agency has been trying to get in touch with somebody, that information can be shared. If a phone number changes and an advocate hasn't been able to get in contact with the family and doesn't know how the family's doing, maybe somebody else has that information. We really want to make sure that children and families aren't falling through the cracks and aren't going unnoticed. And we know that each agency that's involved has a very specific role, and we all complement each other by coming together and having those conversations and sharing that information. And we really want to help enhance interagency working relationships. There have been, not necessarily in this jurisdiction, but over time there has been lots of different relationships between certain agencies, and so we really try to help bring everybody together. We send our agencies, our multidisciplinary team members to different trainings. We host trainings to make sure that our agencies are, and our our team members are able to be educated in the best practices. We know that the field of child abuse prevention is ever changing. There's always new information and best practice, and we want to make sure that all of us are adhering to the same best practice and able to function as a smoothly oiled machine. So in the Christiansburg office alone in 2018, we saw 189 children, and we did conduct a few more interviews than that. Some of the children had multiple allegations at separate times, some needed follow-up interviews, but we saw 189 children, and 34 of those came from Carroll County, and one came from the town of Hillsville, from the town of Hillsville. And so we recognized the need to open up a space because children and families were driving up to or over an hour to get to our Christiansburg office. So as you can see here, we've seen boys and girls. We see children of all different ages and demographics. I mentioned earlier that not all cases that go through Child Protective Services or law enforcement come to us. Typically, we only see allegations that are of sexual abuse in nature, severe physical abuse, witness to homicide, or domestic violence. We typically see the more severe cases, but you can see sexual abuse has been our highest allegation that we've seen. So just to give you a few more numbers, in fiscal year 18, 28% of all the cases that we saw at the Christiansburg office were from Carroll County. And that's quite a bit. I mean, that's quite a bit, and that's a lot of stress for not only our families and children, but also for law enforcement, CPS, and other team members that are having to drive that far and, make it, I think it ended up being like a 4-hour day for them to come up to Christiansburg. So we recognize the need to build or to create a space here in Carroll County.
So you're working on a site or a building?
Yes. So we actually just opened a space in April here in Carroll County. It's in the old Adult Learning Center right next to the old Woodlawn School. And we are still undergoing some renovations. We do have some repairs that still need to be made, but we're working on it, and we've got some great support from the Sheriff's Office in doing that. Currently, our CAC will serve Carroll County in the town of Hillsville, Grayson County in the town of Independence, as well as Galax, the city of Galax, and other surrounding jurisdictions as courtesy. We are working on finalizing memorandums of understandings with each of these locations, with Carroll, Grayson, and Galax. And that's really just a document on how we are all going to work together to make sure that we're all adhering to best practice, and we have an understanding and expectations for when we do when we are a part of these child abuse investigations. So like I said, we are in this building. We started conducting interviews in April, and since April, we've already conducted 23 interviews in our Woodlawn space alone. So we're definitely seeing a lot of kids, a lot of families. We have put things on hold for a little bit just because we are needing to complete a few renovations to make sure that the space is safe and healthy for our kids. But we're in the process. We've had some meetings, so we're hoping to get it back up and running very soon. And I mentioned earlier, at the moment, myself and my colleague are traveling down to Carroll approximately once a week or so, and or as needed to conduct these interviews. But we are hoping that once we get the building up and running full time, that we can hire additional staff to be housed in our Woodlawn office full time to be able to be more accessible to the community. So moving forward, we're really hoping to build community awareness. I mentioned some of the services that we provide, but we also provide services such as education for the community. We do presentations for the community about child abuse prevention, mandated reporting. We've been at different festivals and events to just build that awareness on safety, internet safety, body safety. We also really want to strengthen existing partnerships within Carroll County and surrounding surrounding areas, but also form additional relationships with potential partners, whether that be churches, community members, different boards of supervisors, as well as potential donors. We are a nonprofit organization, So while we do receive some state and federal money through grants, we also rely on donors and like I said, and grants. Do you have any questions for me?
I think there's been tremendous need in the past for the void that you're filling. And I hope and pray that it works really well, because some of these kids sure get the short end of the deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I have to say this would not have been possible without the support of Sheriff Gardner, Donnie Spangler, and Teresa Isom with the Department of Social Services. They've really been a spearhead for us and really have advocated for us to be able to open up a space down here, because the need exists, and we want to make sure that we're not causing additional stress to families by making them travel hour and a half to get
I made contact with the school system also. I'm sure they will work with them.
Thank you.
Provide specific awareness training, more than just family, social services. I'm assuming you work with those folks frequently. Just
Sure.
talk shop, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And do you provide that to other folks? I mean, law enforcement,
Sure.
maybe fire and EMS, these folks, respond to emergencies. There may be something that they would see or perceive there that they might need to direct in someone's location.
Sure, absolutely. Actually, 2 Fridays ago, we hosted a training, and it was in Montgomery County, but we actually have one scheduled, I think, in October, November, to Carroll County and surrounding areas on things such as minimal facts and interviews. If first responders, patrol officers, law enforcement, fire, rescue, are to arrive on the scene, some things that they can do. We have sent several of our members to trainings. We have a state conference in Hampton, Virginia, that we've sent a big group of Carroll County folks down a couple years ago. But also just regular community. Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to do any presentations. If there's ever a need, give me a call, and I'm more than happy to make that presentation to fit whoever's needs it is. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Waste industry is not here tonight, so we got fire and rescue.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come and talk to you tonight about the county's emergency services. I know most of you guys know me, but for folks here that may not know me, my name is Everett Lineberry. I'm the Emergency Services Director for the county. I've been here for just over 3 years now. And I have a lot of information to share with you. I could probably speak half the night on this topic alone, but I understand how busy you are, and I want to try to put everything into as concise a summary as I can, still give you the information that I think you need, and kind of give you an idea of what's going on in the county when it comes to emergency services. Really, this is just an overview. It's a report, kind of a 30,000-foot view of what's going on here. Obviously, here to answer any questions you have. Just interrupt me if you have any questions, and also I'll be around after the meeting if anybody from the public has any questions or comments they'd like to make. So the objectives that I wanted to talk about tonight was to provide a broad overview of all fire, EMS, and emergency management services that are provided to the citizens of Carroll County. I want to talk about our current operations and some of the challenges we face, our expenses and cost recovery and some options we have there, and then finally some steps for the future. So emergency service is a pretty broad term. What are we talking about? So really what I'm here and why is kind of under my purview is fire and rescue, EMS, and emergency management. So when I talk about Carroll County Emergency Services, I'm referring to our volunteer fire departments, Cana, Hillsville, Laurel Fork Volunteer Fire Departments, our volunteer rescue squads, which would be Laurel Fork and Piper's Gap, and Carroll County Fire Rescue, which is the county agency, and then Carroll County Emergency Management. I talk about a system a whole lot, and the reason I do is because our departments, though they are individual autonomous entities, they're regulated by the state, they function together. We all function together, one goal, one team, and by doing so, we are very effective and very efficient doing that. Volunteer and career personnel working alike, working side by side, makes each organization stronger. And in turn, our system is more efficient and effective for that. It's done through mutual respect and cooperation. I've been in emergency services in Carroll County since 1994, was when I first took my first EMT course. And when it comes to a lot of the fire and rescue services, there's, it's a lot of type A personalities, a lot of strong opinions, and a lot of folks that if they don't try real hard, sometimes it's hard to get along. But I'm very fortunate. Our fire chiefs, our squad captains, they have a servant's heart. Everyone wants to work together, and because they want to do what's right for the citizens. So I really appreciate that. It's important that we continue to work within the system because freelancing is just very counterproductive, and that's what we need to definitely stay away from. Our EMS geographic divisions are broken up into what we call areas. We have area 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And those mostly correspond with the volunteer systems, volunteer rescue squads numbers that they go by, the squad numbers. For instance, Laurel Rescues, they go by the 300s, and so that's area 3. And so we try to match that up so it kind of makes sense to folks. Laurel and Piper's Gap and Laurel Fork are in 3, 7, and 5, and then areas 2, 4, and 6 are all covered under Carroll County Fire and Rescue as our primary first due area. So first, let's kind of touch on the volunteer rescue squads. I'm going to talk about just kind of some broad comments about all of the volunteer EMS operations, and then we'll talk about some of the individual departments and some of their challenges that they're facing. Volunteer EMS comes with some unique challenges. When I first took an EMT course, like I said, in 1994, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was 80 hours around that, somewhere in that neighborhood. That same course today is 245 hours. So there's been a huge increase in the amount of training necessary, and we're talking about an entry level. That's an entry level position, the EMT basic. Paramedic, you're up into the couple of years, training for that. So the reporting requirements are so much more today than they ever have been before. Again, when I first started, one sheet of paper, you could spend 10 minutes on it if you took your time, and you were done. Today, everything, of course, is computerized. There's state and national data sets that are required for statistical purposes. And also the data elements that are required by CMS and private insurance companies. There's just a lot of data that has to be input every time one of our people, whether it's volunteer, career, doesn't make any difference. They all have the same reporting requirements. And there's a lot of information that goes into these patient care reports. They can spend as much as an hour or longer if it's a real complicated type case. Time away from families, again, with all the additional reporting, you've got that much more time that you're back at the station getting all of that stuff completed. And so that's a problem that we've had to face. And then with EMS is the call volume. The call volume has been very high. I think it's interesting that us and the city of Galax tend to have some of the highest call volume in Southwest Virginia. I know that we, most of the time, lead the pack in the number of residents we have at the New River Regional Jail. And then I thought it was very interesting, Ms. Simpson was talking about the number of cases that they go through at the CAC. It seems to be abnormally high for this county. So we are unique, and I think every locality is unique in the needs that they have. We don't have a large population to draw from to replenish volunteers. There are larger cities, I'll give you an example, Blacksburg. Blacksburg's got a flourishing volunteer system, but it's a college town. They have a constant influx of new folks and are coming and going all the time, so it makes it much easier for them to have a good, thriving volunteer system. EMS system abuse is another thing that affects our volunteers. Day in and day out, middle of the night, people calling 911 when they really probably didn't need an ambulance, and they call in 3 and 4 and 5 times a week sometimes, and that burns out our volunteers. And then, of course, burnout. That's really what it all boils down to, is just burnout. It's really hard on our volunteers, rescue squads, because of just the amount of work that they have to do. It is tough, but we really must continue to work to maintain a volunteer base. Every system, regardless of how large or small it is, has a volunteer component to it. As a county, we have our career personnel strategically located in areas where we have high call volume. But the problem is with that, if some of the outlying areas, maybe it doesn't have as high of a call volume, but they still have calls. Those areas, it's much longer response times in getting the EMS crew out there. So those are the areas it's really important to have some volunteers that can function as medical first responders at the very least, if they don't have enough folks to be able to traditionally respond to a call and transport patients. The volunteers could bridge the gap in the area and still be able to perform a vital function for their communities. The fee-for-service, all the departments in Carroll County share a common reporting software, and we all bill career and volunteer alike. Everybody bills through one entity, and that's actually Carroll County Board of Supervisors, and that's what shows up on statements whenever people get those. So with the volunteer rescue squads, all of the revenue is accumulated and collected by the county. I get a report once a month from our billing vendor who tells me how many calls, which calls was attributed to this agency and which ones was attributed to that agency. And then we turn around and cut a check to those agencies. And so it's a pass-through system where the volunteer rescue squads are not using local taxpayer funds. All of it, they generate all the revenue themselves. The only exception to that is for the Line of Duty Act benefits. We also pay for their vehicle and accident insurance. This year, for fiscal year 20, that's budgeted at $52,896 for the volunteer rescue squads. That's for the VOTA and the vehicle and accident insurance. Another source of revenue for the volunteer rescue squads is state funds in the way of what's called the 26% return to locality. It's also referred to as 4 for Life. Okay, and we get about $30,000 yearly, and that varies because it's based on the number of vehicle registrations, and it's $4.25 per vehicle registration. And we use a formula to divide those funds fairly to the departments, where part of the fund is divided equally, and then part of the fund is divided based on call volume. And that way, smaller departments can still, have something to work with, even if they don't run a whole lot of calls. All right, so the individual departments, Laurel Rescue Squad is the first one I got up here. Laurel has had some recent improvement, pretty significant improvement, to be honest with you, over the last several months, and basically where they've been able to add some new members. The problem that they'll have to deal with is sustainability. Those few members, once they, again, get to that burnout stage, they're going to have people in behind them to replace them. And they really need that constant flow, a steady flow of new members coming in to be able to maintain it. So that's what we'll need to work on. In 2018, they were dispatched to 373 calls. They answered 48% of those, 27% without our assistance at all. In 2019, you see that number has already climbed to 66%. So that's pretty good improvement for that department. So I'm really proud of what they've been able to accomplish in a short time. And let me clarify too. So when I say 27% and 30 at the bottom, 36% without county assistance, meaning they answered the call entirely with volunteer staff, and the county staff didn't have to go support them.
You might explain some of that. You might explain how some of that is. I think we've discussed in the past is sometimes because because they don't have people training, you have to bring another unit there.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, we'll have, if they have one EMT that can respond, and then we'll send one provider to go make a crew with them. And then in those cases, we transport in their truck. The way the billing system works is whoever's unit you transport in, that's who bills and receives the revenue for the call. So we don't want to take that away from them, we do bill, but we also share in that revenue. They will in turn reimburse the county $100 for each one of those if the patient had insurance and if the county receives revenue from that call. We don't want to take $100 out of their pocket when they didn't get anything, any revenue from that call, which sometimes happens. So we both have expenses, and so we do share in it when those types of calls happen. Laurel Fork Rescue Squad is our smallest agency. They have very, very few members. In 2018, they had 305 calls. They answered 23%, 15 without our assistance. But if you notice in 2019, we've had a very sharp decrease. So far this year, they've only answered 7% of their calls, 6% without our assistance. And that's not a lot of calls. So I don't want to see this department go by the wayside. Again, like I said, we've got to have a volunteer base in this county. So what I would recommend is that if they can't respond with a full crew to answer the call, if they could respond in a first response capacity, where they can still be active in their community. Once they become visible, responding in their community, I think their community will respond back and they'll actually begin to grow. So that's what I hope. And we've talked about it. I've talked about it with them, and they actually like that idea and think that's something that is feasible for them to do. So I think that's something, and I know their community center that they is very active with the meetings they have, and I think just recently they had the squad captain out there and talked to him about some of these issues that they're facing. Piper's Gap Rescue Squad, it's our largest agency. They have the highest call volume. Last year they had 957 calls. They'll probably go over 1,000 this year. They answered 91% of their calls in 2018, 74% without our assistance. However, if you look at 2019, we begin to see a little bit of trouble. 80% calls answered 2019 so far, and then 57% without our assistance. So the problem is call volume. Again, they're burnt out. I always talk about the 80-20 rule. 20% of the people doing 80% of the work, and in their case, it's more like probably 90-10. And that's unfortunately how it is with a lot of volunteer departments, where you have a few people that just do the majority of the work. Once those people start burning out, if you don't have fresh ones coming in, they've been lucky. Piper's Gap being in the western part of the county, next to the city of Galax, it's a populated area. It's a younger population. They have had more luck with getting fresh members, and I hope that they're able to do that. However, Matt Talbert, who's the captain there, he and I have talked on several occasions, and we're at that point where they're ready for some help. So we're going to have to address that at some point. Volunteer fire departments, they've seen a decline in volunteerism, but nowhere near to the degree that we've seen in EMS. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think the type of work that the volunteer fire departments do is just different, and it's something that is more attractive to people who want to volunteer. There's nowhere near as much training requirements. The reporting requirements are, usually most of the departments have one person that does the reporting, and the rest of the members really don't have to fool with it that much. So that's pretty good. They don't spend as much time away generally, unless it's obviously a large structure fire or something like that. And their call volume is much lower. So it's more conducive to a volunteer environment, and thankfully we've not seen a decrease with the volunteer fire departments like we've seen with EMS. I think that when I talk about retention and recruitment, I think that is something, again, that we've got to start looking at pretty hard. We've got to find funding sources to be able to do some programs where we can offer some benefits to our volunteers, EMS and fire. Because again, this county is, we don't have the tax base to be able to fund a paid system that stretches from one corner of the county to the other. We just don't. And we need and rely on our volunteers. So we need to support them as much as possible. Funding is a little different also than it is with the rescue squads. The fire departments don't have the ability to generate revenue like the rescue squads do, not the same ability. So the majority of their support is local tax dollars. In fiscal year 20, our budgeted expense for the fire departments is $378,882. Now, that is operational expenses. That includes their insurance, their line of duty act benefit. All of that's included. A smaller portion is what's called aid to locality. It's a very, very similar program as the 4 for Life, where we get funds from the state, we distribute it to the fire departments as they need it. And like the 4 for Life, the aid to locality is very specific on what it can be used for. That's got to be, for the fire department, has to be used for, obviously, for firefighting purposes. We do we provide some financial support to a few outside agencies. Galax, Freeze, and Ivanhoe also provide fire response, and they have a first due area inside Carroll County, and so we provide some financial support to them as well. Apparatus replacement for the fire departments continues to be a topic that I know Mr. Robbie McCraw serves with us on our fire board, and he knows that's something we've talked about for a long time. The problem is, obviously, it's a significant cost. These trucks are not cheap, and but and unfortunately, it's at a time when the county's kind of under some financial constraints, and so we're kind of banging our head against the wall sometimes, so to speak. But the fire chiefs have been very diligent, have worked very hard on coming up with a replacement plan. The plan makes it easier to plan for cost, find funding resources. It's easier to budget whenever you have a plan. The plan only provides for replacement of heavy vehicles, pumpers and tankers. We have left it up to the individual departments to find their own funding for replacement of the small vehicles, utility vehicles, brush trucks, things like that. And I know they use their aid to locality funds for a lot of that as well. The goal with the plan is to replace Class A pumpers within a 20-year window. The Class A pumpers are the ones that are going to affect a department's ISO ratings once they surpass that 20-year-old mark. So it would be best if we were able to replace them within that 20-year window. The tankers, not so much, and the other smaller vehicles, not so much, but definitely the Class A pumpers, something we've got to make sure we keep up to date. It does call for a reduction in fleet size. The first couple of trucks in the plan are designed so they replace 2 trucks, 1 truck replacing 2 trucks. And that's also provides a limited benefit when you have less volunteers to operate trucks. So, it also calls for standardization as much as possible. We know some departments have different needs than others, but for as much as possible, we want to standardize the equipment across the county so that the departments, because they work together so much, it makes sense for them to have like equipment when possible. And then our volunteer departments, Canada Volunteer Fire Department in 2018, just some statistics for you. They ran 258 calls, 41 structure fires, 26 vehicle fires, 27 brush fires, 85 motor vehicle accidents, and 79 that couldn't be categorized in any of those others. Hillsville Fire Department's 2018 numbers, 352 calls, very similar to Cana's, 83 structure fires, 34 vehicle fires, 21 brush fires, 141 motor vehicle accidents, interstate. They cover so much more of the interstate, they have a lot more motor vehicle accidents. And then 73 other miscellaneous. R4 is our smallest department. They run 51 calls in 2018, 12 of which were structure fires, 5 brush fires, 14 motor vehicle accidents, and then 20 other miscellaneous. All right, so that brings us to Carroll County Fire and Rescue, which is our county career staffed department. Carroll Fire and Rescue operates 3 shifts. Each shift is led by a shift lieutenant. That shift lieutenant is part of an ambulance crew. They work 24 hours on, they're off for 48 hours. There are 8 personnel per shift, and they staff 4 ambulances. Our call volume in 2018 was 4,155 calls. And 4 ambulances is just about right for that amount of call volume. There's rarely a day, Lieutenant Schleybaugh is here today, who's the lieutenant on today's shift, and I believe at least once, maybe twice a day, we was in a position where all of our trucks were busy, and that happens every day, where all the vehicles are tied up on calls. So 4 ambulances is pretty much the minimum of what we can get away with to answer that many calls. Again, like I was saying, it's very interesting. There's counties our size, same population, they'll run half that many calls. It's really perplexing of why our call volume is so much higher in this area as it is in some other areas. We do have one cruise dedicated to the Cana, Lambsburg, and Fancy Gap communities. That was placed there in August of 2017, I believe. And that's worked out really well down there. We were, Cana was, when the rescue squad was there, was also struggling with answering calls. The problem with that area is it was taking us so long to get from Hillsville all the way down there to answer a call, 30, 40 minutes sometimes, depending on where it was. And that's just way too long to have to wait on an ambulance whenever you're, having a heart attack or whatnot. So we were in a position, we didn't have much choice but to staff a truck down there, and it's worked out really well. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback from the community who I know enjoys us being down there. All of our crews are made up of at least one ALS provider. ALS is Advanced Life Support. All the full-time staff are also trained to the Firefighter 2 level, and that started in 2009. The Fire Rescue Department began supplementing volunteer fire departments with manpower in 2009, as we were able to and as needed. All the staff are provided a set of firefighter turnout gear, and each ambulance contains 2 SCBA, or self-contained breathing apparatus units. Once they're en route, they radio ahead to the fire chief, let them know who they have coming, what capabilities they have, and the fire chief then can utilize that crew in whatever capacity he requires. The goal is to attempt to reduce the additional burden as much as we can on the volunteers to help at least slow down burnout or prevent it as best we can. I think that we should continue to look for ways that the people that we're paying to do this job do what they can do to take some burden off the volunteers so that we keep our volunteers longer. That's the whole point. Retention and recruitment I've also got listed here because it's really not just a volunteer problem. 4 or 5 years ago, our folks would be on a part-time list. They'd probably be there a year or 2 or 3 sometimes before they would ever have an opportunity to move up to full-time staff. We just frankly don't have people knocking down the doors any longer to get a job. So it's not just a volunteer problem. It's just a problem in the industry. So, like I said, I've been here about 3 years. I started in June of 2016, and when I come on board, one of my top priorities was to examine the expenses and our revenue and determine where I felt like we could make improvements. And so, basically, what I did was I tasked all of my lieutenants and myself. We sat down and went through all of our processes, everything we do from top to bottom, day to day, and determine where we are inefficient. And we found a lot of significant changes that were made. For instance, it's just some examples here. Our inventory control was dramatically changed. Our scheduling of personnel, managing and containing comp time, that was a big problem before. With a schedule that when you work a 24-hour schedule, basically the way it works is the staff is paid based on a salary. And once they reach 212 hours in a 28-day period, then anything over 212 hours in a 28-day period is accumulated as comp time at time and a half that they can use to take off at a later time. Problem is, once you accumulate so much, then you gotta pay it out. And that was costing us a lot. So we put a cap on that and really kind of cranked down on managing that a lot better. We looked at our QI processes and developed quality improvement processes for everything we do, day-to-day operations. We had a lot of vehicles at that time that were really costing us a fortune in maintenance. So we found ways to eliminate those. We took advantage of grants to replace the trucks when possible. And so far we've used what's called re-chassis to replace trucks rather than actually buying new ambulances. And a new ambulance will cost you upwards of $200,000 to $240,000 depending on what equipment you need on it. And a re-chassis I can do for about, well, $130 or less. So it saves as much as $100,000 whenever we can do that.
Re-chassis.
Yes, sir.
Do you do the frame and engine transmission rear end? Or
What they do is, so you know, the ambulances are modular, so you have the box that's mounted basically on like a Ford chassis, you know, like a pickup truck chassis. And so if the box is in good shape and still meets the regulations, the safety regulations the state sets forth, then it makes sense to take that box off and put it on another chassis. We have done this twice so far. It's worked out really well. They actually, not only they take the box off and re-chassis it, but they refurbish the box with new upholstery, flooring, cabinetry, new paint. It looks like a brand new truck. You wouldn't know that it wasn't a brand new truck unless you just knew. So to me, it doesn't make sense to do it any other way. Why wouldn't you do that? So, all right. So cost recovery was another, you know, all those things dealt with our expenditures, and the cost recovery, our revenue, was the other side of things that looked like we could make some improvement on, and it was. It turned out to be the most significant thing we were able to change. And what we did was we reviewed all of our PCRs, patient care reports. Haven't figured out everything in this industry's acronyms, so I'll try to explain them. Patient care reports, we review all those for billing errors and to maximize reimbursable claims and reduce denials. We developed a QA process that matches the workflow of our billing vendor so that whenever they get a call sheet from us and they start to process it, they're able to do so and they don't have as many errors as they may have before. All the PCRs are subject now to a rigid process before being sent to billing. And instead of it getting to billing, then finding a problem, sending it back to us, we have to fix it. It just delays the problem. The goal is that the billing company has billed the call out to the insurance within 24 hours of we run the call. That's the goal. Now, it's hard to do on the weekends, but during the week, that's what we try to do. We saw a significant increase in our revenues, offset expenses, but there is more work to be done, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. There we go. So this is kind of a rough graph here, but I just want to kind of give you an example of some of the improvements we made. So in fiscal year 2016, our cost recovery, and I'm referring to the difference between our expenses to our revenue, was 51.4%, and I'll be honest with you, that's pretty dismal. So we needed to fix that. So as we worked on our expenses, as we worked on figuring out ways to make our paperwork better so that we get reimbursed better, as you can see, that top line, which is our expenses, begins to come down, revenue comes back up. By fiscal year 17, we're at a 73.3% in 1 year. I think that's pretty impressive, and I'm pretty proud of that. And as you can see, from that point on, we have stayed in that same gap. Now, obviously, the goal is to bring those lines even closer together. One goal that I had with this presentation tonight was to try to get some data from other localities to kind of compare where we are. And I was able to get some, but I wasn't able to get enough that I could identify all the little components, and I was afraid it wasn't going to be very accurate. But what I did find is that this 70% is pretty good compared to most localities. So the percent of our total county operating budget, this doesn't include the schools. So just look at the last one, fiscal year 20, volunteer rescue squads took up 0.2% of our operating budget. Volunteer fire departments, 0.86%, and then Carroll Fire and Rescue was 1.16. So all fire and EMS combined was 2.22%. Well, that's what we have budgeted for. I think we may be able to do a little better. We'll find out a year from now exactly where we stand, but I think we might be able to do just a little better than that. Keep in mind, this is after we take the revenue out. So if you just took the expenses without the revenue, it would obviously be a lot higher than that. Once you back the revenue out, then we're pretty much in line with most localities our size that have the same call volume. And again, our call volume tends to be higher, so it's it's a rough thing to be able to compare. All right, then the last thing we'll talk about is emergency management. So sometimes folks have or think emergency management is just another part of fire and rescue. It's really not. Emergency management is a function of creating and maintaining the framework within a jurisdictional boundary to reduce vulnerability of natural man-made disasters. I currently serve as the chairman of our local emergency planning committee, or LEPC, and it's a regional committee. It's made up of Grayson County and the city of Galax and Carroll County. We meet quarterly in Galax and discuss common things that we all can share, that where we can assist each other with when we have disasters or some kind of significant event that occurs. Our Emergency Operations Plan, or EOP, it was last adopted by the Board of Supervisors in August of 2017. So we're about halfway through that, so it won't be due again to be adopted until 2021. Our EOP names the county administrator as the director of emergency management. I serve as the emergency management coordinator, and then Lieutenant Slayball is serves as my deputy coordinator. Moving forward, some things that I think are on, at least on my radar, things we should really concentrate on. The fire apparatus plan, replacement plan is something we do need to work on. The longer we delay, it's just going to cost us more in the future. As tough as it is and as hard of a pill as it is going to be to swallow, I think it's something we're going to have to look at real serious. We've really got to focus on retention and recruitment of volunteers and explore benefits that we can offer them and ways to fund that. That's something that I'm looking at. I would like to see us update our cost recovery model. I'm talking about our EMS billing. I would like to see us move to what I call a compassionate billing model. I'm not talking about hard billing. I'm talking about adjusting our soft billing model so that people who can afford to pay can do so. It's kind of upside down right now. The folks that are paying the balance of their bills are the folks who are from a generation that are going to pay their bills no matter what. And unfortunately, some of those are on fixed incomes, and it's kind of sad when some of those people come in and they're paying $5, $10 a month just trying to get their bill paid. And folks that have second homes and boats and new cars and all that, we don't see them. So I think we need to change that. We can create a system that's fair, that has discounts for financial hardships based on a threshold that we can set. I recommend using the poverty level and some correlation to that to income. And then we can also offer discounts for early pay. Everyone in this room probably at some point over the last year or two has probably been to the doctor. You've gotten home, you've got a letter in the mail that says, hey, your insurance paid this, but you still owe a few dollars. If you'll pay by this date, we'll knock off, so much percentage. There's no reason we can't do a similar type system that incentivizes people to pay these balances. I'd like to see us increase our social media presence so that the public can stay in touch with what's going on in emergency services. That's kind of been on my radar for a while now, but there's only so much you can do. But we're working on that as we speak. And then emergency alerts, I'm working with our Twin County 911 coordinator in a way that we can market our emergency alert system so we get more folks signed up on it, so we can actually get messages out. So finally, just a little praise for our first responders. These folks do an incredible job day in and day out. I'm not just talking about fire and EMS, but our law enforcement brothers and sisters. It really is a thankless job. There's really not a week that goes by that I don't hear about somebody coming back that they were cursed or they were physically assaulted in some way or another, verbally assaulted. So it really is a thankless job. I could talk about some of our individuals all night, but for the sake of time, I do want to point out one. Wake Forest Baptist Hospital recently recognized one of our providers as excellence in EMS, and that's firefighter EMT Anthony Marshall. Anthony's been with the county as a faithful employee for about 2 years. He's also a lieutenant with the Hillsville Volunteer Fire Department, and at a event just a few weeks ago in Winston-Salem at one of the Dash baseball games, they recognized one person from each locality that hospital serves, and Anthony was the person chosen for Carroll.
Anthony is.
Yes, sir.
Is not only a quality person now, when he was in elementary school, his sister was top of the line.
I can well imagine. I can well imagine. Anthony is one of those people that I'd like to clone as an employee. He's great. He really is. I couldn't ask for anyone better. Well, like I said, I could talk all night, and I don't want to take up any more time. But my contact information is here. My office number is 730-3197. For anybody that has any questions or needs to talk about anything whatsoever, my email address is like all of our county emails, first name, period, last name. You can find it on the county website if anybody don't remember it. But I want to be available for anybody that has questions, any comments, suggestions, ugly remarks, just, whatever. I'll be around for a while after the meeting, so if anybody has anything they'd like to ask. But if there's nothing else, I will shut up and sit down.
Can I ask a question? If I can exercise my First Amendment right?
Stand
I thought
if you want to be recognized. All right, step forward to the.
You want to go up there?
Yes.
Okay. Everything sounds good. I just got one concern. What is Virginia law on answering calls as far as EMS following the speed limits?
You may sit
What
down.
did you tell them?
You may sit-
And this goes to the sheriff's department too.
You may sit down now.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
To answer your question, the law in Virginia states that when responding, anybody, and this, again, law enforcement, any emergency responder responding to an EMS call or any type of call, must respond with what is referred to as due regard for life and safety, or life and property. That leaves a lot to interpretation. Basically, what it boils down to is if they, end up wrecking and hurting someone, then probably somebody's going to say, well, you wasn't acting with due regard. But so they have to be very careful. There's not an exact speed limit. Obviously, they're not responding to a call. They're supposed to honor the speed limit. But when responding to calls, they have to respond with due regard, is what the law reads. But does that answer your question?
Pretty much, I guess, depends on what you call due regard.
Well, like I said, it does leaves it open.
There's more things in the Code of Virginia as well. You can't go down a one-way highway. There's a couple other things the sheriff could probably rattle them off, but I did them years ago. But that's the main one. That's the liability issue that puts it on the driver.
It does.
Now, due
Yeah.
regard for the safety of others.
That's right.
So, all right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if you'll give me an email address, I'll send you the Code of Virginia that outlines those things if you want. All right, now we're down to public hearing on IDA change. hearing for the IDA name change. 7/17. Have anyone who wishes to speak on that issue? Anybody else? Board member? All right, I'll close up at 7:18. Brings us to, committee appointments.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
after holding the public hearing, the board is free to entertain a motion, or if you would like to change the name of the IDA to the Economic Development Authority, you can certainly do that, or take action on that later.
Resolution, I think you'll have a copy of the resolution. Does anybody wish to make a motion on that? There's, in the code section, there's really nothing spells out one way or the other, where it's IDA or EDA, they would both be the same, correct? But EDA is more of a newer thing.
Absolutely correct, Mr. Chairman. The issue is that I think that the thought for marketing purposes, having something that's a little more broadly stated, economic development as opposed to industrial development, is thought to encompass more when you're reaching out to prospective businesses who you might be able to work with in promoting the county. All the ordinance does is change the name from industrial development to economic development.
Did the IDA vote to change that name?
That was requested by a vote of the IDA.
And they voted in the affirmative.
Yes.
Does anybody wish to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the name change.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second, any discussion? Start with you, Bob.
Yes.
Dr. Little?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
I say yes. Phil?
Yes.
Joe Neal?
Yes.
Motion carries. Now, it comes down to committee appointments. We have the VIAA, you told me several times.
Virginia Industrial Alliance Authority. That is a organization, it's a regional, it's Smith County, Graham County, Wick County, it's a regional organization for economic development. Used to be called VIA. Used to be called, Carroll.
That's why I don't recommend it. We pass that by. Do we have anybody applying for any of those positions? From New River Jail, alternate, none of those put in, yes, we pass that by. All right, Ninth District Financing, alternate. Have anybody on that? Any board members wish to be on that? I'll volunteer to be an alternate. Anybody want to make that motion?
Make a motion to accept Rex as an alternate of Ninth District Finance.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Start with you, Joe Neal.
Yes.
Phil? Yes. I abstain. Rob?
Yes.
Dr. Little?
Yes.
New River Regional Water Authority, I'll nominate, since we don't have any applicants, I'll nominate Swell Dalton to be in our New River Regional Water Authority. I have a motion, do I have a second?
So moved.
Motion and a second, start with you, Bob.
We need to be careful about how many.
Do we have a discussion?
We need to be careful about loading down these whippersnappers with appointments. Everybody wants one, but certainly Soleil's qualified, I believe he is.
Okay. Dr. Little?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
I say yes. Phil?
Yes.
Joe Neal?
Yes.
covers, you got a pencil out there? Code of Virginia that covers emergency vehicle exemptions. It's 42.2-920. If anyone wishes to go online and check that, that gives you all the specifics that law enforcement and emergency vehicles, how they may operate. All right, we're down to citizens' time. Douglas Smith.
Yes, sir. Good evening, board.
Good evening.
I have just several things I wanted to throw out. Being retired, I go around and talk to a lot of people all the time. These are just some topics. I'm gonna go sit back down afterwards because we've only got so much time. You're talking about economic development side. So, I'd already put down two things that I'd like to see the county look at because we need jobs and we need money here. Wind and solar are two areas that we have places here. We have people that could perhaps make these cells, work on towers, things like that. We know this county's windy. When I first moved here, I gave it the Roman name Aeolus to where my parents lived on Radio Hill. The wind never stopped blowing up there. So I throw that in front of the board economically. The second thing, economically development, that came to mind, I've talked to a lot of people say, and this has come up before too, the county still has a no alcohol thing. If I were to want to build a nice restaurant out here at the other 77 stop, when you get a nice restaurant, you get a nice motel or hotel. As long as we have that outside of Hillsville limits and Galax, I think we still do it in service. And I know every year when it's ever come up, people have come out of the woodwork bid against it. As I say, I'm spewing some. I know other people may not speak on this. For instance, when the water was put into my neighborhood at Woodlawn, I have a fire plug in my front yard. My real estate or whatever insurance went down because of that fire plug. My neighbor across the street still has a well. When the power goes off, guess who provides their water? They can't flush their toilets. If there were to be a fire, we just heard from EMS at their home, whose water plug are they going to plug into to save his home? And they're just right across the street in a well-developed area at Woodlawn. Lots of houses there, everybody else pretty much hooked on. So I think a reasonable fee still needs to be maintained because what's $100 or $120 a year against your home and your property to have the fire plug nearby? You may choose not to use it, but so I want to throw that out. The training center, Rex, I talked to some of Senator Kane's people that were here. Of course, that's beyond him, but they gave me some intelligence that you were on some kind of committee looking at that. I was thinking of the presentations I've seen here about the children needing beds. We have juvenile delinquent problems. We have, and the big one, and I've talked to several people about this, the community, mental health. This is both a Democratic and Republican issue, hot everywhere right now. We have beds here that we are driving people hours to get services. We have beds sitting there and buildings that are still in good shape. That was quick. A couple more things, but I can live with that if I throw them out.
Just hand it up to us, pass the rest if you want, the rest of them. Just hand it
Well,
to us.
you see how I do things, Rex. I'm not quite on target like these great presenters. But anyway, so I'll throw those out and I can call you up as my representative and discuss anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not on that committee that I was made aware of.
I
We do have a committee that looks at through Recetas, is that not correct, Steve?
Yes, I'm on that committee, and so I guess.
Well, I'm sorry, the information given me, Rex, just for your information, was that the mayor of Galax, Ian Mitchell, and you and some others were looking into some usage of the training center.
We have, because we have, state of Virginia has given us, what, 2 years?
Two years, they passed some
Yeah, so
legislation.
we have.
I would love to see, there's plenty of buildings could be utilized for a lot of services.
And one of those
And
things.
jobs, again, jobs.
And one of those things that you discussed was on that list that we have a committee looking at.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Dillon.
Aye.
John.
How much time do I have?
3 minutes.
Man, not much. Anyway, what I want to speak about tonight is the non-user fee in Carroll County. I know last November, you all voted to repeal it. But, you know, that's about all that's happened. You hadn't done anything. And I'd just like to suggest, and I'd like to make a motion if I could, that, I know I can't, I already do that. But, you know, as a start, don't you think maybe that you could take the 79 non-users that don't have a meter in their yard and go ahead and get them off of it as a start, just as a baby step? I think you could. I think y'all probably need to think about that. I know the PSA is in control of you, and they pretty much tell you what to do, but I think that'd be a step. And it'd be good for y'all too, you know, because, you know, the way things has went in the last 6 months, it looks like, you know, the people out there want something done. People I'm talking to, you know, the citizens in the county, they want something done. And, you can see the results of it. Steve Truitt, gone, fired. Nikki Cannon, gone, fired. The PSA lady, what was her name? Jessica Montgomery, fired. Bob Martin, fired. Robbie McCraw, he's gonna be fired. So y'all need to get us together and start doing something, man. If you will. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just tonight, earlier this evening, the PSA passed the reduced fees. So anyone that was not there, they dropped the fees down to $6 for non-user. Is that not correct? All right, the next person is Jeremy Buckland.
I'm not up here to be a dead horse, even though I stand firm behind the 70 non-user fee repeal. My simple statement is, what about Wildwood? Mr. Martin said in the last meeting that all he had heard over the years, when are we going to get industries? Why not post Wildwood online to any industries that wants to come to Carroll County and state the land is free? Let them pay all the utilities, taxes, building permits. Don't raise the building permits. Give that 15 plus years of building in Wildwood away to the industries that could use it instead of it sitting up there collecting no revenue. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's in the citizens' time. Before we start with supervisors' time, I do want to make notification, we will be having the board meeting July 22nd. It started normally at 4:30, the normal meeting time, and then 6 o'clock will be the normal business meeting time. We'll do start at 4:30 to do a normal closed session and other items. All right, supervisors' time. Bob, I'll go with you first.
Mr. Pruitt. Can you make any general comments about Wildwood? I mean, I'm sure some citizens think the board doesn't do anything to get industry, and maybe that carries over to the county administrator's office. But in general, what great things have you learned is from dealing with the state, and why don't we have industry? Do we ever talk to folks about jobs?
That is a pretty big.
Yeah, I know it is.
I guess what I would say about Wildwood is that a lot of the work has been done, put into place that could make it a success, and it wasn't free. So when you are evaluating a prospective industry and you want to talk about giving them the land for free, you can do that. If they're going to make the kind of investment in our region and in our people, in terms of employment, that, you know, makes it worth writing off a $6 million investment, because that's what you would be doing. As far as who does Wildwood get marketed to, there's several different ways it gets marketed. It gets marketed to certain target, business types like agriculture and advanced manufacturing and some of the other things that VIA has taken on as its focus is. You market it through your own relationships. I've presented it as a potential data center site to probably 100 companies since I've been here. Stuff comes down from the state all the time that needs to be worked, and we work it. And, you know, basically, the first business that was at least made a commitment and received a grant package to build it, there was a local company. So that came about as a relationship, as a result of the relationships with people that are in this room. So, there's no one set way. I will tell you though, that the people who evaluate industrial sites are very sophisticated and they're very numbers oriented. And there's one of these things about every 100 miles up and down every interstate. So you're competing against everybody everywhere. And you always finish second if you don't win. You know, so you have to figure out why you didn't really win and try to address those weaknesses so that you finish first every once in a while. If, yeah, you finish second, they won't tell you. So, we just have to keep on pushing it and working it until the right kind of companies eventually do come. And there are some exciting things that are in the hopper now. And I hope so well we'll be able to tell you all about those in a few months.
Thank you. It's been very disappointing to me. At times I felt like the whole process was a dog and pony show meant to highlight something that Richmond was doing, but it was not set up to benefit Carroll County, quite frankly. And but we have tried over and over. Who on the board is opposed to getting industry? Anybody? Well, I'm not. And but you don't snap your fingers and get it. I'd like to see Volvo say we can't handle another 900 employees. Send them up to Carroll. They can meet it. It doesn't work that way. But we keep trying, and one day we will be number one. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Rickard.
I really don't have anything tonight except that I think it's unfortunate that some citizens are coming up for us state facts, which are not facts, which are totally in error, but I'm going to speak to the individual ones.
Everett, thank you for the presentation that you presented. It was very good. And we take for granted that we're always going to have volunteers out there to serve in those capacities of rescue squad and firefighters, and don't realize how fortunate we are to have who we do have. And it's a thankless job. It really is. And I do appreciate all you all do. And I would like to reiterate what Tom just said, and I'll just go on from that. Thank you, Tom, for those comments. And I don't know of anything else I have to say tonight. I thank everyone for being here. It's always good to see everyone. And that's it.
Jack?
Yeah, I'd like to thank everybody for being here tonight. Got some feedback from citizens, a great report from the EMS director. You and I have talked about some incentive programs, and I intend to get back with you on those to try to recruit and retain volunteers. I know they're a basic, very basic that we need to keep. I want to extend my condolences to Crystal. Crystal lost her dad last Monday. I think that's correct. And I'm sorry I wasn't there. But I want to do that. I need to apologize for not being at the June meeting. I had some medical issues, as you know, and wasn't able to attend. And as far as the citizens commenting about those 3 people being fired, they were not fired. They resigned. Okay. The
county administrator and the financial assistant county administrator and the PSA director resigned. They were not fired, okay?
If you're
Just wanted- I just want to
terminated, you're fired.
Excuse me?
No comments?
Everywhere I ever
No
been.
comments from the board?
No, they resigned.
Outside the board?
They resigned. I just want to make that perfectly clear. Carroll County is in a transition period right now, a huge transition period. We've got a lot to change as far as our administrator, our financial director, our PSA director. We've got a lot of work to do. One of the things that I hope this board does, and one of the things that I promise to do, is take our time. And let's don't jump off the bridge. Let's see if we can correct the issues that this county's faced over the last 25, 30 years. It can be done, and with cool, level heads, it will be done. And I think we can get people into Wildwood, and just like Mr. Truitt said, it's not easy. You can't just go out there and say, hey, here's a place to build industry. There's so many questions and so much logistics that they want to know about everything. And I've learned that over the last 18 months of being a board supervisor. Other than that, want to keep working diligently for Carroll County. I want Carroll County to prosper. I want Carroll County to come back to the front. I want us to come back to the front, and we can do that. This board can do that with level heads and objectively thinking and doing the right thing for Carroll County. Thank you.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming out again, as they all already have. Thank you for the presentations you give us tonight. They were both real good, and I appreciate that. And I want to thank you for putting up with my coffee tonight. I'm sorry I had to go out on you, but that's all I got.
I want to thank everybody. I want to thank the folks for the presentations. Going forward, EMS is always important to us. Same way with child services protection. That's why we're in the position we're in as far as people in jail and everything else. If you want to know what causes it, it starts right there. And that's the number one thing we need to address first. As far as economic development, they've got big charts. You can drive up the interstates. You do like I do frequently. I drive all the way down to middle Tennessee, and you see paths, places where it's all flattened out just for economic development. You go to North Carolina, the same thing. You see it everywhere. So we're in competition with everywhere else. We try our best. We're not going to get everything, but the other part, we don't have the population. You go around Bristol, Kingsport, they got a big population compared to us. A lot of our people travel down to Pulaski County. They drive to Winston. They drive to Roanoke. So these are where our people travel to. So we just don't have a great number of people that are employable people that way. If we go back to jails and the other things that cause us issues. I appreciate everybody's speaking tonight, and ask for a motion to adjourn.
Can I,
Yes.
one more thing? One thing I did forget to mention, on July the 27th, it's a Saturday, Carroll County Department of Social Services doing a foster parent fair from 11 until 2 here on the complex. They're doing all kinds of activities and things trying to promote more foster parents in the county. So the Hillbillies are going to be there, the Shriners are going to be there, and I would like to see a lot of support for that so we can get more foster parents in this county.
Thank you for reminding me about that, Joe. I appreciate it.
It's July 27th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m.
We have a motion for adjournment.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just to clarify, did you intend to recess to that July 22nd meeting, or is that going to be a special call meeting?
It's just going to be another board meeting. If we have business to conduct at that point in time, we will conduct it.
I would just say, why don't we have a motion to recess to that time?
All right. Do I have a motion to recess until?
Mr. Chairman, I move we
recess until July 22nd at 4:30.
Yes. All right, I have a motion to recess until July 22nd, 6 P.M. Do I have a second?
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?